Great. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And thanks for those joining us today. Thank you, Mark, for joining me here for this discussion, this webinar. Really excited to do this with you. Been meaning to do this for a while, and really excited to talk with you about your work here at AMO and your work in the PA space, most importantly, and how the two connect. So my name is Ryan Palmer. I am the VP of Clinical Education at AM Opportunities. And I work very closely in the domestic space with our schools, like PA schools. I work also on the clinical side, so helping find those sites for our PA school partners, among other professions that we work with. And part of that work is informed by wonderful strategic advisors we have for our different professions. And Mark is our go-to strategic advisor for PA. We couldn't have a better one, and we're going to talk about that role today. So before I jump in and start chatting with Mark a bit about his views on PA education and how AMO might be able to assist with that. I wanted just to give a quick overview of AMO for anybody watching this who might not know who we are. So AMO for AM Opportunities is shortened version is AMO. And really, in a nutshell, we build workforce through clinical education. That's really what we do. That's what we stand for. That's what our mission is. And the way we do that is really in a comprehensive two-sided way, where we work with our clinical partners that have a capacity to host clinical learners, and then our schools who have a need to place clinical learners, and sometimes even clinical learners themselves. So a very brief history is we started as primarily as an internationally focused company about a little over 10 years ago. And we really were focused on physician education and trying to bring international create better workforce through international students. So say you're a student in Poland and you want to come to the US and become a physician. You might be in school in Poland. You might be a practitioner. Well, you need to come to the US. You need to do at least one rotation with a US physician and get a merit-based letter of recommendation to apply for the match. And our founders saw there was a big problem in our workforce. A lot of the workforce was being addressed through international at the time, students at the time. So they created a very comprehensive end-to-end white glove service, if you will, to help connect those types of learners to the US. And the reason it's important is that is completely the model that we still use. Now we're much more working in the domestic space in per our conversation today. So really, what we really do is take out all the administrative hassle of hosting students or placing students. So, you know, if you're an international student and you need to come over to the US, you have a lot of paperwork you have to do. And certainly if you're going to host somebody internationally or domestically at your clinic, there's a lot of things that need to be done. We take care of all of that as part of our service. We have a technical tech platform that makes it very easy to see all the documentation. And then we have, most importantly, a wonderful, wonderful staff of devoted professionals who are there every step of the way with the clinical side to make sure that that process is smooth, and with the student and school side. And we could talk more about that as we discuss today, but that's us in a nutshell. And really, again, that same issue of placing students, if you're an international student trying to find a rotation in the US, is no different than if you're a domestic institution that has a distributed learning model, meaning you don't have a hospital as part of your school sitting right there across the street where you can place all your students. So that includes PA schools, nursing schools, doctor of osteopathy schools, and even some community-based allopathic schools. So we work with all of those currently to try to employ our model and make everyone's life a little easier by finding what is so hard to find these days, which are clinical rotations. So really our value proposition is what I just talked about in that administrative support. You get all of that in working with us. But really specific to the PA space, we really have what resonates with us. We are a mission-driven organization to build that workforce pipeline for the US patient community through clinical education. And what resonates with us so much in the PA space is this movement of helping to try to help the PA profession meet its stated goals. And we'll talk with you, Mark, about this, but really it's that movement of for PAs by PAs. Now, certainly PA students working with a physician is a wonderful, wonderful clinical rotation. There's nothing wrong with that. But in working with Mark and working with our other PA colleagues, it's become very clear that the PA profession would really like a PA student to train with a PA professional. Makes a lot of sense, just like a physician would want to train with a physician. And nothing wrong with not doing it, but it makes sense. So what we've really leaned into as an organization is to try to build upon our network, which is a vast network of clinical rotations, really building out a PA network. So whenever we work with a PA school, we're able to try to fill their placements first and foremost with our PA preceptors. And that is a concerted effort that we are really growing into and doing a lot of work in right now. So a lot of work in, what does I mean by that? Well, one of the things that it's really nice and working, I think, with AMO is we really do understand PA education. And we're not new to the game here. In fact, we have 42 different schools that are working with us actively in finding clinical placements for their students. And Mark could talk about that. A lot of that's been due to Mark's guidance and professional reputation, helping us connect to those schools. But we really have learned a lot, and we really know PA education well. And I think if I'm a PA educator, one of the biggest things I'm thinking of what do these people understand PA education is ARC-PA. Do they understand accreditation? Because that is such an important part of the clinical placement process. If you don't have your accreditor on board, you're in trouble. So we understand ARC-PA, and primarily we understand it through this gentleman right here, Mark Archambault. Mark is our go-to PA education resource, and really everything we do, we run through Mark in the PA education space, not only just so to understand the educational model, but also to make sure it's compliant with ARC-PA standards, which Mark will talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mark, and then I'm going to let him talk, because I think that's probably the most important person in the room here that you'd want to hear from. So I'll go ahead and say, give a quick bio of Mark. Mark is an experienced PA educator with 26 years of experience, including leadership roles in developing a new master's level PA programs and the medical education concentration within the University of Lynchburg's DMSc program. He has a demonstrated history of collaborative relationships and exceptional client outcomes in the areas of program self-study, accreditation compliance, and new program development. He owns the PA consulting service company, Archambault Consulting, and is the senior strategic advisor for PA education at AM Opportunities. I can just say from personal experience with Mark, he's been so tremendously helpful in bringing AMO sustainably, incredibly into the PA space. And really, we rely on him heavily for everything we do to make sure that we are up to the right quality standards that would be expected by the profession. So Mark, thank you very much for joining us here. And really, I just want to kind of have a great conversation with you like we always do, but ask some questions and really share with our audience just your insights on however that works for you, not only with your role in AMO, but your role within the profession of PA education, because it is extensive. So I'll start off by just asking you a question of what inspired you, Mark, to work with AMO in the first place?
Yeah, it wasn't so much inspiration as much as more serendipitous connection with AMO. About a year ago, one of my clients that's a new developing program was placing their first cohort of students out on clinical rotations. And anyone who's been through that process knows that a lot of times those initial commitments that you have aren't always there when you actually need to go to place the students. And so one of their students was actually actively involved in looking for their own rotations and had contacted AMO and presented AMO available preceptors to this client for consideration and use. And so that program director reached out to me a little bit in a panic. They had accreditation concerns that what the student was doing may be viewed as recruiting their own clinical sites, and they had clear understanding of the ARC-PA standards and that students are not able to be required to do that. But we were able to work through that situation productively. And that client ended up partnering with AMO to collaborate to help place their first cohort of students, and really avoided what could have been a crisis with student placements at that time. So it was hugely valuable. And through that interaction, I asked the client program director if they'd connect me with AMO. And my intent was really to talk to AMO leadership and make sure that they were doing things in alignment with ARC-PA accreditation standards, because I knew that if they were working with a lot of programs, if things weren't done correctly, the potential for negative impact was pretty big. And unfortunately, I had just seen that with another vendor in a different product offering, where what they had done to support a program ended up really creating challenges that contributed to that program being placed on probation that we had to kind of work through and extricate them out of. And so I really wanted to just reach out to AMO, see what their understanding of ARC-PA accreditation was in the clinical site and preceptor recruitment space. And much to my surprise, that conversation went really well. And I found AMO to be very accepting of feedback and guidance and eager to learn and wanting to make sure things were done with a lot of integrity and being very responsive to those concerns. So I was immediately impressed by Kyle, the CEO, Ben, the CEO, COO, and also Ryan during that conversation. And fortunate for me, Kyle reached out to me and extended this offer to be a strategic advisor for AMO. And so I've been involved with AMO for this role for about a year now, providing guidance, as Ryan mentioned, for the PA educational space.
Great. And I can tell you, I was very excited when I spoke with you because we were just starting to get lots of inquiries from PA programs and starting to work with some. And my background in medical education, I was quite familiar with the LCME and how important it is to follow your accreditor's guidelines to the T, and how important that is in the PA space with ARC-PA. So having you come across, not only just with your inquiries, but then with your background in accreditation was exceptionally helpful. And yeah, we were very, very excited that you said yes and continue to be. How do you see AMO as an organization that supports the future of PA education, Mark?
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned already was this mantra that's becoming more prevalent within the PA profession of PAs, for PAs, by PAs. And so the PA profession is rapidly growing. It seems like it's been rapidly growing since I've been a PA 26 years ago. And one of our main shortages within the profession is clinical placements. And so AMO definitely serves a key role there and has really bought into that mantra of for PAs, by PAs. Historically, I think as our profession evolved out of medicine and under leadership of physicians, we've tended to rely historically on physicians to precept PA students. And it really surprised me at PAEA's annual forum last year when Sharon Luke, the executive director for ARC-PA, referenced that 70% of students are precepted by physicians. And she made a call for PAs to be more involved and active in precepting their own students. And so I brought that information back to AMO, and AMO saw the value in that model as well, just through their recruitment efforts. And Ryan, you may want to speak more to this, but that it really made sense within the model of serving different professions to align PA preceptors with PA students. You mentioned understanding of ARC-PA accreditation expectations, and if anyone's been following the accreditation climate in PA education, that's very challenging. Over the last 2 years, we're seeing about a 35 to 40% probationary decision rate by ARC-PA. It's largely driven by self-study, but the second most common topic is clinical education, tends to get a lot of scrutiny. But this model of having NCCPA certified PAs be preceptors for PA students really simplifies the B306 and B307 standard compliance within ARC-PA's expectations. It's just ideal to have PA preceptors in regards to those two standards.
Yeah,
So that's I would say that's one big area, is really promoting growth of PA precepting for PA students.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to having a focus on accreditation compliance, a lot of my focus has been on new program development. And so I've been very fortunate to be involved in consulting for over 10 years now, and have successfully helped 25 new programs become accredited and enroll students, and continue to work with them through the three-step provisional accreditation pathway. But AMO has been really helpful in this new program development space as well. Having sat in that space a lot myself, and talked with a lot of clinical directors and program directors in these situations, it's very challenging for them to go out and recruit healthcare systems to secure the required affiliation agreements and commitments from preceptors that aren't going to happen with the student actually being in place in that rotation for many years. There's a lot of reluctance on both the healthcare system part and the preceptor to make commitments to that level of support. But ARC-PA at the initial accreditation review requires all that documentation of that support to be present. And so AMO, with their existing network and the resources they have, has been very helpful, as well as being able to provide strategic consultative guidance and services to really target recruitment specific to that program's needs. So AMO has been critical in supporting at least two of my new program clients in making sure that they had a strong clinical network to get their new program launched.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing that forward, because that's, that's twofold how we've been able to work with the PA space, and potentially even threefold, which I can describe. But, our kind of our typical model is we'll work with a school that's looking for a certain type of rotation. Optimally, they'll do it with some strategic focus where we need OBGYN rotations in this area or anywhere at this timeline. And then if hopefully we have that already available, and then they're able to place their students with our existing network. Or if we have enough time, we often will be able to look actively for those rotations, and when they come up, are able to work with get those to the school. But then, that's the rotation-based model. But then what you just described is a critical area that we have been really had several different schools we've worked with at this point. And it's been to very successfully. They've all been able to follow that accreditation, but it's that, getting that initial application and getting those affiliation agreements and all that paperwork. We have worked with organizations that need just a few things that they just can't get on time, and they rely on our network, because we have this vast network of preceptors who are always teaching students. And all we really need to say is, would you be willing in a few years to teach these students from this school? And they often, most of the time, are very willing to do so, which provides the documentation that these schools need to apply for their ARC-PA accreditation. We've even helped schools with the majority of those placements when they've been in a bind. And then what we often will do is, after that's done, we can either have them go to those rotations, or we can enter into a different kind of consultative relationship with that school, where we actively help them in that 2 to 3 year ramp up, develop out even a more specific network, so they can use the ones that they applied with, or we can continue our relationship with them and find ones that might be closer, or you never know where a preceptor is going to be in 3 years. So, that's part of the rub, right? To turn your affiliation agreements, and then the hospital has been bought and sold 3 times by the time you're there. So we can get them over that hump, and then we can really work collaboratively, and we do work collaboratively with these schools to help them thoughtfully, mindfully, and sustainably build out that clinical network they need for when those boots are on the ground with those students. So yes, and really all through that, if we're running that through you, Mark, to make sure when we're recruiting a site, that we're getting crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, so that it is compliant. Because that's often a question we'll get working with a school is, how do I know we're not going to get nabbed by ARC-PA for this? And we often will just use you to say, hey, we're running this through an expert, and we haven't had any issues since, knock on wood. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's always a dynamic space. And so I always appreciate AMO when new things arise. So you have a really good handle on the common considerations with ARC-PA compliance, but I also trust and know that you all reach out to me when you run into new situations, and have had some really good conversations with the COO Ben on some of those compliance concerns. And again, always a commitment to integrity and making sure things are going to be in good standing with the accrediting body.
Right. I mean, it really is. I've been a former, a dean role at a institution. I know that if I were working with AMO or any kind of third party, it's an extension of our brand, of our level of quality for our students, and we do not take that lightly. If a school is trusting us with even just a one-off clinical placement, they're trusting us with their student in a certain, the quality of that student's educational experience. And so it's of paramount importance to us that not only meets, but potentially even exceeds the quality levels that school has set. So part of that process is finding, every school is a little different. There's certain things that they have to do based on accreditation, but everyone has different kinds of forms and standards and conventions. And we really internalize that. And for the student, it should feel, they know they might be working with an external company, but we're really an educational partner to their school. So it isn't a disruptive experience. And the nice thing about it is sometimes the students will actually say when they've worked with both the school and the AMO, they sometimes like AMO ones better. This is across the board because we always have somebody devoted 100% to that student's experience. The preceptor there will never be a situation where the preceptor is like, who are you? I didn't know you were coming. There's just a lot of levels and things that I know I couldn't ensure when I was helping to run clinical programs at a school. So it's a nice match. And I think it's the growth in the space is a testament to kind of our ability to synchronize well with the school's needs. But Mark, I want to switch a little bit and talk a little bit about, preceptors. Preceptors are so important. And I do want to also say too, we place many PA students with physicians currently, even some NPs that qualify based on our accreditation standards. But, so it's not like in working with us, if we don't have a PA preceptor, no dice. What we're trying to do is meet the profession's stated goals by building that network, because really up until a few years ago, we weren't really in the PA space. A lot of people actually still think of us as an international company, only work with international students. And that's quite it's quite not the truth anymore. We're just as invested domestically as we have been in our legacy model of international. We're still international. We're very much domestic. And so our growth in the space has PA education has been part of that growth, and it's fairly recent, which is why someone like you helping us, guiding us is so important, so we get it right off the bat. But we do place students with physicians, so if there wasn't a PA rotation available or by a PA preceptor, we'd absolutely do it with a physician. We just want to try to get as many PA students in with PAs as possible, and that requires us recruiting more, and that's what we're actively doing. Okay, so I'll stop with that and go and ask you about preceptors, since we're talking about that. Preceptors are so important for not just because we need them to get the educational process done, but these are the people who inspire the next generation. So how do you see the impact of preceptors on the development of the next generation of PAs?
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And so preceptors leave a lasting impression on PA students. In preparing for this discussion, I was thinking back to my clinical experiences, and I still remember each one of my preceptors and also some of their very specific personalities and how that played out in helping me grow and develop as a learning PA student. And so just very fortunate and blessed to have great support from preceptors that I still remember to this day. And a couple of my preceptors actually entered PA education after I did. So I worked clinically for a few years, but started in the education space pretty early in my career. And so it's also been great to continue those collegial relationships where the experience levels have flipped. And now I'm a peer and a colleague with the folks that I originally knew for precepting. Has been really rewarding.
Yeah.
So I can't understate, the impact that preceptors have on students, and so critical to their development. And one of my preceptors, as an example, really pegged my personality at the time of being a perfectionist. And so they challenged me to do something that made me uncomfortable every day. And so that, simple interaction and that advice has served me well throughout life, not just in learning medicine and becoming a PA, but really in everything I do to challenge my boundaries of comfort and continue to grow and improve.
Yeah.
As far as preceptors, what we constantly hear or consistently hear from healthcare system leadership is there just aren't enough PAs to hire. And
Mhm.
this, may have some geographic influence on where this is most prevalent, but it's a pretty consistent mantra. And I've unfortunately heard of scenarios where there's not sufficient PAs to hire, and so healthcare systems are having to look to other professions to fill current openings on their team. So I'm very much pro growth of the PA profession. Again, I've been involved in helping many new programs get started. And I really want the PA profession to be the go-to profession to help continue to provide access to care in the country, as well as provide cost-effective and quality care. So the preceptors are one of the main resource challenges for our PA educational model. And so not only do they have a huge impact on individual students, but they have a huge impact on where our profession is placed within the current healthcare system.
Yeah. And, thanks for that, Mark. Really that idea of the mentorship model is so important in really inspiring a learner to become a clinician, but then, potentially to practice. And then when I said earlier, we build workforce pipeline through clinical education. It is, I cannot tell you how many times in my career in academic medicine, I've saw the power of a clinical rotation to one inspire a student who wanted to be an OBGYN doc to walk away from her family medicine rotation, say, I want to be a family doc. I saw that a million times. And it was almost always because of that power of a connection with a preceptor or a group of preceptors, which represented that organization, which represented that community. Because whether you're in a big urban area or a small rural area, you're part of a community and you're serving a patient population. And really, you cannot understate the power of that. And so what inspires me to work here every day is really to create more and more connections, not just so we can have more clinicians out there, but really so we can inspire more people to go to have those connections. Because I think, that's going to make a very strong, sticky proposition on staying somewhere if you had a great experience during your clinical rotation. So that really resonates with you. With me, sorry. So now we're talking about PAs. So in your opinion, how does AMO help PAs balance the role of providing patient care, which is ever present, but then also with teaching? Because I constantly hear, well, teaching's going to slow me down. I would like to, but I got to get my RVUs right. So in your opinion, how does AMO fit in to make this value proposition a little better?
Yeah, from the preceptor side, AMO really helps to remove and reduce the administrative burden of having a student. So the communication related to having a student with you, as well as, again, all of the forms and paperwork and agreements and things that need to be in place. Um, in regards to integrating a student into your practice and being efficient, I think it's important to also recognize the role that PA programs play as a partner in this process as well. And your programs that are sharing these students for placements are typically eager to interact with preceptors, to help with preceptor development, to discuss strategies to be efficient. They want you to be willing and able to precept students and are there as a source of guidance to help you navigate that process. The good news is if you have fear of having never precepted before and if you'll be successful or not, I would really try to limit concerns about that fear. The majority of student experiences are viewed very favorably. We have data from PAEA that 80% plus of all of the students placed with preceptors are rated good to excellent. And so students are going to have a good experience with you, and they're learning, and showing that you're learning if you're new to precepting just enhances that relationship and the learning environment.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you hit the nail on the head. So often you hear a new preceptor, because often what we'll do is we'll work with systems that traditionally don't have a teaching culture. They're not, but we provide the infrastructure to make them able to do it. And then you'll get some of their preceptors, MD, PA, doesn't really matter. We'll say, well, I'm not familiar with teaching. And it's like they've forgotten that they were taught in the apprenticeship model, just like they're about to teach this student. And I really just try to assure them, look, you've got this baked into your DNA. You've been doing, this has been part of the clinical profession since it began, is this apprenticeship model. So one, you've got that, but then, there are supports and to also help, because I do understand it is, you're busy, you haven't done it for years, and I get a lot of questions around that. So, I'd be curious, Mark, you're the professional here on this. So, and this doesn't have to just be through AMO. This can be in general, resources and what, if you're a preceptor and you're new to this, what support is there for preceptors to stay updated on the latest trends and best practices in PA education?
Yeah, again, I think the PA program that is the student's host institution is going to have resources that they'll be able to share. We see a lot of times that the AHECs often have precepting resources, and a lot of information is available online that can help support topics such as giving feedback to students, which can be very challenging or a little uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot of resources out there that are already available. It's just connecting preceptors with those resources.
Yep.
And just focusing a little bit on being successful, I've been involved in a little bit in preceptor development for both physicians and PAs. And it was really interesting with doing one of our live in-person sessions one evening as a CME program in the Lynchburg, Virginia area. The take-home point from both the physician and PA preceptors was the key is to be kind to students. And so sometimes we can lose focus of that with all of the pressures on our time and the competing interest. And so it was just kind of eye-opening that the big take-home point for the group at the end of the evening was to be a good human and be kind, and students will have a good experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks, Mark. I agree with everything you said. To kind of go back to your point about the school, when we make a connection as AMO between a school and a clinical site or preceptor, we are facilitators of the process. We help with the administrative infrastructure. We do not get in the way of that. So if you're a preceptor and you're taking a student from a certain school, you have access to that school and that school has access to you. We do not stand in the way of that process because of the importance of what you just talked about. That school often has a lot of resources. What we do though, is we're able to really, I think, get in there a little quicker sometimes. If there's an issue with a student, if a preceptor has an issue, if a school has an issue, we're able to really serve as a liaison and really quickly go after that and reconcile it in a way that I know when I was kind of overseeing these programs, I'd often find out about a problem with a preceptor or student at the end of oftentimes the academic year, when it was far too far along to really reconcile, except for the next year. And so, AMO really plays that role to get in there. And then we are also just a resource. So if a preceptor said, do you have any resources and feedback? Like you said, our staff can bring those forward. I can bring those forward. We have a lot of people who are ready to help support that preceptor's success, because the preceptor being successful will mean the student's successful, which means the education is successful. So really what we're always trying to do is make it so the preceptor can teach, the student can learn, and that's it. And we take care of all the rest. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, two thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One is we have seen instances where things have played out that were outside the control of the preceptor, healthcare system, or the program related to student safety. And so I've seen AMO be very responsive in those situations to help immediately pull a student from that placement and
Right.
find an alternative placement. And so most PA programs have somewhere between 2 to 4 staff, and maybe one of those staff, a little more in larger programs dedicated to clinical education.
Yep.
Having AMO in your corner gives you about another almost 50 sets of hands to help
Yep.
when those issues arise. So the available resources that can be kind of focused on student safety issues or those things if they emerge is definitely a benefit of AMO that I've seen play out to really make corrective action when needed.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, another thing, we're very clear, we are not replacing any staff of any school. We're not seeking to do that. We are there to be a bandwidth extender, just like you said. Usually the people who are the most happy when we come on board are those coordinators, because we just made their lives a lot easier by doing what you just said. We help with making sure evaluations are returned in a timely manner, which is always a big headache. Instead of just one staff person having to focus on all these evaluations, now with an AMO rotation, he or she can simply say to our coordinator or whomever is assigned to that program, hey, can we get that? And in fact, they usually don't have to say that because we've already gotten their timelines and made it happen. So really, like you said, it's almost like instant staff as part of the equation that comes as part of our work. So I'm glad you brought that up. And we do the same thing on the other side. Many of our sites, if a school was to go to, say, a critical access hospital or a place that didn't have any teaching and had was really, really having trouble just keeping staff employed there, let alone, people who would be hosting students. So oftentimes these places will say, look, I can't take any of your students. We don't have capacity. And what they often mean is that they don't have teaching capacity. They don't have the administrative capacity. And that's very true. They couldn't, to the quality level the school needs, really support that student's success when they're there. And it's really, really a tragedy because those people that they're hosting could become their future workforce. So it's kind of like a doom spiral. And what we do is we say, look, you don't have to hire anybody. Like, we will be that administrative infrastructure. We'll make sure these students are onboarded to your satisfaction. All the HIPAA compliances, the vaccinations, everything that you need done, we'll make sure the student has that up to date and the school understands that before they walk in your door. So we actually are able to open up a lot of doors that schools just simply can't because they don't often have that infrastructure to be able to go and have that level of hands-on with a clinical site because they've got so many other ones. So Mark, that's really, the end of the questions I had. This has been a wonderful conversation. And what I wanted to kind of have you provide any last thoughts you'd like to share with this audience, either watching actively or maybe in the, watching this on a recording or whatnot. Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think anything new. I think the big thing for folks, if you're not yet precepting and you're interested but hesitant, I encourage you to reach out and have a conversation with AMO. And again, you're going to be successful and you're not going to be in it alone. There's going to be support for you. And then also for programs, for all the reasons that we discussed and the 50 extra set of hands to help manage your work, I think it's really worth having a conversation and establishing a relationship with AMO to see how that could evolve and what support for your clinical network could look like. And I know we'll likely hang on the call here for question and answer. So I know, Ryan, you mentioned, I think, the word doom. I often feel that I work in an area with a lot of doom and gloom with ARCPA accreditation challenges.
I was going to say the accreditation.
again, with the decisions we've seen the last couple of years, but I'm happy to also answer any questions that folks may have related to accreditation compliance in the clinical education space. And just for clarity, to like one topic that I think is pretty straightforward to address, for the B306 and B307 standards that have to do with the preceptors, what we're really looking to do is to ensure that the physicians are board certified in the area of the SCIPI instruction, or that it's an NCCPA certified PA, or that it's an advanced practiced registered nurse that is certified in their discipline. And if those things are present, then the compliance risk for B306 and B307 is mitigated. And so that's a lot of the conversations I had with AMO initially when focusing on PA preceptor recruitment. That B306 standards is should. And so if anyone involved or aware of ARCPA accreditation has probably heard a should is really a must. And so we really try to approach things directly in that manner. And The places where a should standard could come into play or get really nuanced and context dependent for that program. But typically that's going to be limited to your rural based programs with a rural focus, where they may have a little more flexibility to build out a robust process to demonstrate compliance, to be able to venture outside of those three criteria I mentioned for the preceptor qualifications. But again, there's the little accreditation tidbit for folks to wrap things up for today.
Right. And I think that's really important though, too. If I'm a program trusting this third party company with my students' education in many ways, I don't want to have to guess and second guess and triple guess that this rotation that I am sending a student on is compliant and I'm not going to get nabbed for it on the next site visit. And so it would never happen with AMO because we wouldn't even put a program in front of a school unless they met one of those standards you just mentioned in terms of that preceptor. And if we had any questions about it, we would go to you and we pre-clear it. So there's a lot of, I think relief in that when programs work with us. And this also is that pre-accreditation work. We understand that they're going to be looking at those affiliations and network and say, is this person board certified? Is that? Yes, they are, or we would not send those. And we also do all the back end work of having the proof that the preceptor has said it, yes, I'll take the student. Any kind of paperwork, like a preceptor onboarding form that has to also go, we make sure it's all done and we turn it back to the school and really help them with that accreditation process. Another thing I'll say, another area we've been exploring with some PA schools, and we've certainly worked with medical schools in this capacity, is this idea of clinical campuses. One thing that's been really kind of astonishing to me in terms of just my experience with the PA profession in academic medicine, I was always working very, very closely with PAs. I worked at Oregon Health and Science University, worked closely with their PA program for years and years. I have PAs in my family, so know the model very well. But it used to be very localized, and students really stayed pretty close to the school. And this wasn't because of us. I mean, this happened kind of in simultaneous to us entering the space, and probably precipitated us entering the space. Was many schools now, PA schools, are looking to expand those borders, either sending students to rotations that are far away. And when they do that, what they'll say is, look, if I'm going to send a group of students, I'd like to send them as a cohort. I'd like to, if they're going to go to this part of the country, I'd rather it not be for 4 weeks. I'd rather it be for 4 months, and they can do X, Y, and Z. And even some schools are now talking to us actively about a service we provide where we essentially help them establish clinical campuses. So they could send a cohort of students and do all of their requirements in a geo-specific type of place, either within one facility or a few different rotations that are within close driving distance of one another. And there's been a lot of interest in that just when I've talked to PA programs, because and frankly medical programs, they say, look, if I can expand my doors here a little bit on clinical, I can recruit students from a different part of the country. They can come and do their in-person work for a year or a year and a half or whatever they need to do it, and then they can go back to that part of the country where they're from and do their rotations. And they're going to be, especially for PAs, they're much more likely to be hired in those places, and they'll stay in their communities. So it's really a net positive for the school, of course, because they have more enrollment, more students, but then for those communities, because now these students are coming to a community they've never been to, they're staying where they are. So have you any thoughts, Mark? I know this is a question, we haven't discussed a lot, but do you see this in talking to schools, them kind of expanding their borders and expanding their horizons for where students go? And do you see this being continuing or changing, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. So I think programs' preference is typically to try to keep students within a commutable distance from their program, and that can vary widely based on the geographic area. And so that might be a longer commute in a rural area, a shorter mileage commute, but a longer time commute in an urban setting. And then I've seen bodies of water get in the way where something that was, as a bird would fly, relatively close, but to drive there was not permissible or feasible, I guess is the right word I'm looking for. So I think, that's always the preference, but You mentioned the distributive model, and there's, I think, two forces that are driving that. We really have a national applicant pool and applicants coming from across the country that may want to go back and have placements in their hometown or in regions that they want to go back to work in after they graduate. So that's a little more haphazard on where those locations could be. The other is, especially in certain states where there's been a high number of PA programs for years, there's just saturation of clinical students. And so whenever you can have a geographically focused location to expand your footprint, I think makes a lot more sense to programs and to students. It can simplify student housing in addition to simplifying the administrative work of the program. I feel like that's always been going on. So I think it just may be more prevalent as we continue to have PA program growth, where we're currently at 309 PA programs in the country after the March 2024 ARC-PA meeting.
Right. Great. Well, thank you, Mark. I'm going to go ahead. You had mentioned signing up here, and I wanted to share 2 QR codes with our audience. I understand those who are here with us, but then also anyone who might watch this remotely or on a recording, you can simply just get your smartphone and point it. If you're interested at all in precepting with AMO, again, this is no obligation to do so. This is simply just opening the process where someone from my team, frankly, will reach back out to you and talk about what the process is and answer all your questions. And if you're interested in doing it after that, say yes, and we'll get you onboarded. And if not, thanks for your time. You can scan this. It'll go to a form and you can just fill out information. Someone will contact you. Also, if you're interested if you're watching this as someone who works at a school and saying, hey, we might like to work with AMO for any one of these value propositions I described, you can scan this. This will actually send you a good link to an email to my colleague, Tracy Doherty, who is our lead, who works with all of our school partners. It'll shoot, right in your email, would like to talk to you, Tracy. She'll write right back to you and set up a meeting. And again, we really, we take this process seriously. We understand these things take time. And it's really based on credibility, relationship, and trust. And those are all 3 things that AMO is core to our very being in our work here. So I encourage anybody interested to go ahead and fill one of these out. And if not, please keep in touch with us. We are growing rapidly, and we really want to, do what we can to help solve this crisis in our country, which is the clinician shortage. It's everywhere. It's not just one specialty, one profession. It's all of them. And really, at the end of the day, we are here every day to help solve that problem. So thank you in advance for any of your contributions to this process. But if you don't work with us, thank you for all you do as clinicians every single day, or administrators, or whatever you do. And Mark, thank you so much for not only doing this webinar, but just giving us your time and your expertise to help us be as good as we can be for our PA school partners and clinicians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much.